Welcome back to another episode of the Lost and Found podcast. And today I sit down with Chris Wilson from the Unshakable Man Program. And ultimately, we really got into how men, but also people in general, can use the technique of getting into the body to start to really navigate what is going on. We spend so much time in our thinking center, but a lot of our nervous system is about the feeling, and really the way to navigate our emotions and how we really react to things that happen in life is by going into the body. In this conversation, we're both really honest and authentic about different things that we've experienced within relationships and other areas of life. So I really hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that bell notification so you get notified every time a new video drops. That's it from me. Let's get into it. All right, we are live. Chris, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And we spoke after episode 3 with Amir Khaligi, and you were saying that you'd like to kind of add some of your flavor and ideas and what it is that you do with Unshakable Man. And I'd really love to have a conversation, just diving into all of these practices and ideas, and really kind of having a deep dive in
Yeah.
this conversation. But to start off with, could you give us an overview of what Unshakable Man is in its at its core?
Yeah. Well, first, I'd love to just say that from afar, I've really enjoyed watching Amir, and I really enjoyed the that conversation that you've had with him. And I think that it's not to just lend my voice, but it's to just share a practice, right?
Mm,
To me, being an unshakable man is around learning to connect and to be able to open to experience my life in its fullness, and that happens on and through my body. It's not in my head, right? Like we connect to the experience of our life through our bodies and through our nervous systems. And so when you ask, like, what is the unshakable man and what is our community and who are the men in my life that I practice with, these are simply a group of men who value showing up in their life and creating a space in their life where we slow down together as human beings. We slow down and we practice, and this is what I always like to say, the core intention is to practice tools and skills to slow down and get out of our heads and egoic patterns and to get into our bodies, where we can then learn how to show up to the experience of our life in more empowering ways. And um, yeah, it's not just me, right? Like this isn't just the unshakable man, right? Like this isn't there's lots of men's groups out there. There's lots of communities of men who are practicing and discovering these tools. We just happen to be one of them, right? And we have our practices and our ways of dropping in into the body. But oftentimes what I like to point out first and foremost is just that, and this is something that I think I see through. I haven't gotten to practice with Amir, but I can feel it when I see it in the man's practice and the way that he shows up. And I can hear so much in a man's voice,
mm,
in the human voice, so much more than what they're saying, right? That they really feel something. They appreciate the depth of practice, right? Of discovering these tools as men, and then taking what we discover in that practice, which is directly experienced, out into our life and relationships. And that changes how we show up in the world. And that whole entire process is healing. That whole entire process is a process of discovery. And I think one of the things that I always remind myself is that these things are discovered. We're not making them up. Like, they're so rudimentary. They're such simple practices of simply one of the practices of being here with you, of arriving here in the space, right? Like just coming into the space and arriving here. I can be somewhere else, right? Like I can be in my head in the image of the conversation I just had with the two guys who are working on the building, right? And my worry about the internet versus being here present with you, right? And in my body.
Yeah, wonderful, man. Thank you for that. So, where do you
Yeah.
think, where do you think this disconnect comes from? For the fact that there are these containers and groups like the one that you have yourself in the Unshakable Man program, and it does feel like there is a necessity for this because people miss it. And
Mm-hmm.
why do you think that happens?
What I see it is that it's natural. It's a part of our environment. It's how we relate to the experience of our life as human beings. If we and and that's why it's so amazing and so special to discover is that if we back up from, and this is my view, right? This is my view on a practice. So I'm very open to others, and so um, if we back up into being born, showing up in the world, we've survived. You and I survived to get to where we are today, to where we could have this conversation, right? And that process of survival is a process of survival. We have an autonomic nervous system that's constantly scanning the environment below our conscious awareness, and it is designed to keep our body safe, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean connected, right? That doesn't necessarily mean in a state of connection with the environment, right? Oftentimes it is in a state of threat. It's in a state of, oh, does this sensation that's coming into my body send a signal to the brain that something important is happening to my body's well-being, and I need to tighten, I need to harden. And through that process of tightening and hardening, we craft an identity, we craft a bunch of scripts and adaptive patterns, and we we make that into I am Chris Wilson. I have a self-image, right? And that enmeshment with my society, with the people that are in my life, right? And then I hold on to it really tightly. I hold on to it in order to help myself feel safe, right? Because if I let go of that identification with my job, right, or that identification with how I show up in a role, that's really scary, right? And to let go of that thing, right? And it gives us a sense of outer purpose. And so what I think happens is that, to your question, is that we try a bunch of things. We really try to hold on tightly to things that bring us joy, and we try to run away from things that hurt us, right? And we're all just trying our best. And then if you're, I think, one of the lucky ones, you're kind of like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill, it rolls back down. For many men, we actually achieve the thing we thought we wanted, and we think we'll feel better. Everything will be okay when I get that thing, right? When I finally get that right relationship or that job, right? Or when I finally overcome my addiction to pornography, or when I finally become like the perfect yogi, right? But then like you actually get there if you do, and then you realize that it's not about that. It's about allowing yourself to open and to be with these experiences that are in your life, and that our inner purpose is actually simply to become whole. It's not externalized. It's not to achieve something. It's not to get something. It's to go through this process. And as I go through this process, I realize that there are actually things inside of me that I have held on to and that have actually helped me to fit in, and we suppress it and we repress it, and that the experience is learning to go in and to heal and to be with those things. And we have names for these, right? Like protective parts or exiles. We can call it shadow work. We have so many different names. Beautiful monsters, trauma, right? Stress, anxiety, but it's all in the body. It's
Hmm.
all in there, right? Like emotions are physical sensations that happen in the body. Stress happens in and on the body. Anxiety, trauma, capital T, lowercase t. And so when we learn to work with the body, we're actually learning to work with everything. We're learning to work with everything that's happening in the experience of the body. And as we discover that we have this inner purpose to go in and to work with that stuff, that purpose isn't subjugated or disconnected from anything in the world, right? It's completely connected. It's for the good of everyone and everything that you actually do this work. And so it stays true. It stays true through breaking up with a partner. It stays true through loss of a friend, or deaths, and right, or despair. And then you learn to bring that out back into the world, and you have that outer purpose. And what we call this is having like the shadow mission to answer the call, to actually be like, wow, I am now aware that this stuff is happening, so I can take on the mission to actually create a space in my life to do this work. And that then as I go into that place, I find the gold. I find what's really truly special and unique. And I don't really know who I am. I'm discovering who I am, right? And I'm learning how to bring that out fully into my life, into my relationships, right? And that entire process is a process of a creative process, right? Of transformation, of manifestation, of allowing. And every once in a while, all the time, we're being taken out of our body, right? Like I just now had that challenge with the internet, and I noticed I got bright red. I got worried. I jumped up, ran in the other room, and I had to I had to like come into my body, right? And the more you get into your body and the more you have these experiences, the more aware you are of not being in your body, right? And now you're like, oh, and no one can tell you that, right? Like, no one, I am the only person who can do this work. No one can tell me what I'm feeling. I'm the only person who can report on my experience. And so one of the things I always like to say is if you're poorly trained, you're just poorly trained. And we learn that in relationship, right? So we have circles, and when you sit, I know I'm going on and on, but when we sit in a circle, we can see all of the men's eyes, right? No one is left in, no one is left out, right? And we can be with everyone's nervous system at the same time. And so when a man knows how to create the circle and how to create that space, then when men bring things into the space, we actually learn to work with what is brought into the space. And what we start to notice is we notice all of the subtle ways we close, right? All of the subtle ways we remove ourselves to protect ourselves. But because we've created a container where any and all emotions can be present, and we aren't enmeshed with identification, like, you are my brother who I'm practicing with. You're not my partner. You're not my little brother who I have a history with, right? I'm able to notice the thoughts, the moods, the judgments, the stories that trigger in relationship to what you bring into the space. And we get to learn how to work with it, right? And then we carry that out because the group ends, right? We don't live in the group.
Mhm.
And that becomes a thing too, right? Like, guys find this work and then they think, oh, I'm just going to stay here. I'm gonna like I'm gonna like join a bunch of men's groups. I'm gonna try to be in a men's group all week long, or like, right? But you can't do that. You got to go back. You got to leave. You got to go work. You got to go deal with your crap, right? And that is a beautiful process. That's it.
Amazing, man. Yeah, some of the things that you said there really resonate with me, and I think falls into some of the things that I help guide people with, which, like you said, different terms for it, but ultimately it's kind of going into those lower three chakras, into the areas where our
Hmm.
sense of self is really kind of created. That root, the sacral, and
Yeah,
then into the solar
yeah,
plexus,
yeah. The hara.
and
Yeah.
it, it's amazing how we don't know how much of ourselves that we have actually fragmented and suppressed
Hmm.
until we start to go in there to find out and to have a look.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
there are aspects of me that I see now that, and here's what I believe. I believe if people can do this work where they do go deep in, and they'll not know, oh my God, like I didn't realize I'd separated this away. I didn't realize it wasn't okay for me to laugh. I've actually suppressed laughter, or I've suppressed joy. I've suppressed love. I've suppressed, like so many of the positive things that we kind of want to experience that we've at some point thought, no, I can't let that out.
Or that you think you need to get from something outside, right? Like, oh, I needed this. I needed a relationship to do this for me, or I needed even this men's group, right? Or
Yeah,
this job, but I didn't. I can discover it on my pillow
yeah,
alone, right?
yeah,
In my bedroom by learning to come into the body. And then realizing along the way that I could try to do it hard, right? Like I could try to meditate properly. I could be like, real tough. Like, I'm going to really force myself through this meditation. And now I'm blocking myself off from it. I'm
yeah,
actually relaxing,
yeah,
right? And it's a process of relaxing and coming in and really caring. And I love what you said about coming into the lower three chakras, right? Have you heard of the practice of pure awareness by Reggie Ray? He practiced with
I don't
Shogren
think so.
Trungpa. It's
No.
a form of somatic meditation. His teacher was Shogren Trungpa, who brought uh, a practicing lineage of somatic meditation to the United States after Tibet was invaded by China, and his story is so. Um, I think the way his practice formed is very special to me, because he Shogren Trungpa on it in his own experience of his life was removed from the culture of Tibet and brought to the UK. And in the UK, he had he they set up a monastery and they were practicing Tibetan Buddhism, and people were coming to the monastery to practice with him. And he found that the people who were coming to practice were almost like pretending. They wanted to try to be like him. They wanted to like wear the garments. They wanted to escape their life. And they were treating coming to the monastery like a vacation or a retreat in an exciting sense, not in a way of going into the body. And when he started to notice this, he's like, they're not going to become Tibetan. Like what I need to do is teach them, give them the teachings as they are. I need to go to their libraries. I need to go to their schools. I need to go meet them in their lives and just share it as they are. And um, the ordained, and I know that in Buddhism, it's non technically supposed to be non-religious, but there was structure there that had formed as it escaped Tibet. And they actually were so afraid of him passing the teachings on that there was rumors set that he had gone crazy and that he was no longer capable of giving the teachings. And so they removed his monikers of being allowed to do that. And he
Right.
was smuggled from the UK to Vermont, and he started Shambhala. and and his the practice of pure awareness is all around discovering how to come into the seat, how to find your seat, the 17 steps of seated practice of just finding a cushion. Like you find your seat and you appreciate your seat because you're going to sit still for a while. If you don't appreciate your seat before you sit, it might be crooked. It might not be stable to sit and to make the journey. So you
Mm.
find your seat and then you come into your body. And there's all different ways to come into your body. And as you come into the body, you realize that you can actually be out of the body, right? And then you breathe down into the lower belly, into the hara, into the dantian, into the root chakra, into that area of the nervous system that the two major spots of the nervous system that we can bring a lot of tension to bring elasticity. You breathe down into the lower belly, and then as you breathe into the lower belly, you breathe down into the earth. And the reason you breathe into the earth is to realize that the space inside of me is not separate from the space outside of me, and that I am actually connected to the environment, right? And that step down regulates the nervous system and opens our somatic experience to everything, right? I now feel into the environment. And our culture, my culture, has told me that somehow I'm separate from you. Like, right? And then now, after you practice breathing into the earth, and it's a direct experience, it's not a thought, it's not a concept or an idea. You can't think your way to this. You have to actually practice. And as you practice, you share your practice with another human being and you relate. What is it like for me? Right. And for me, one of the things that came up for me in practice is um, I had a hard time allowing myself to breathe into the earth because I live on the second floor of a building.
Hmm.
Right? Like, how funny is that? Right? Like, right?
Wow.
Like, I had this idea that I had to go sit outside in the woods. And so my practice would be like messed up all the time because it'd take me 15 minutes to walk to the woods. And sometimes it's raining. But being in a group of men and sharing in that, sharing how my practice was, really helped me work through like permission to allow myself to just breathe down into the earth from the second floor of my building. Right? It's a concept. It's a total facade of the mind, right? And then you breathe up from the earth into the lower belly, and the fifth step is to notice the central channel, and you unfold, and you notice the upward flow of the quality of the somatic of the energy coming from the root up behind the heart, up behind the chest, and you unfold the body. And the body wants to take this position, and the more you get to know it, the more caring and compassionate and soft you are, the more sensitive you become, the more you can feel what you were talking about before, right? And that's why I went through this whole explanation of my practice, is to share how my practice on its own is similar to yours, right? Like, you know that there's something very special to experience in the belly. Like, and in the practice, it's called something to experience. And the reason it's called something to experience is because if we give it a name, it becomes that. Like, I can't call it love, I can't call it joy, I can't call it, because sometimes it's scary as fuck. Like, it really scares me about, is my life going to change? Right? Like, I don't want parts of my life to change. And that has been scary at times in my practice, right? But then I come back, and you have a community of men in your life who you can actually have this depth of this conversation, this, what I'm sharing right now, 15 years ago, I could not even conceptualize having a conversation like that about my practice with another man, let alone 10 men, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I fully feel that. And I really like what you said there about, you know, as you kind of take those first breaths, feeling connected to the earth. Because when I do, and it's not something I've tried, but as you said it, I sent my awareness in my body kind of down to like my root, and I almost imagined grounding into my chair and feeling a flow from the into the chair into the floor below me, and I
Mm-hmm.
felt it. And what I really like about that is very often when I kind of go through my chakras, I mean, I did it in, yoga earlier today. The point in which I start to feel like a connection to all, I start at the root, I work my way up, and then I almost feel like I can feel the energy leave the top of my head
Mm-hmm.
and expand outwardly and
Mm-hmm.
over me. But what I hadn't considered before was from the beginning, feeling that connection into the earth. I really like that. As soon as you said it, I actually felt it like, oh, yeah, yeah, I've been
Mm-hmm.
missing that. I'll have some of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's beautiful, man. One of the reasons it, connecting and grounding in the earth is so important to me to always share in our practice, or in my practice, is that if I have a relationship with the earth, that it is the mother, it is the womb, it is the place that I can fall into to be reborn, that then as let's remember that these protective parts are actually protecting something, right? So they're like tiny human beings, right? Like if I think that I can just remove them and everything's going to be okay, that's not really fully compassionate to the breadth and the depth of what we're doing here. Like I being able to have my practice being rooted in the earth means that when things really get challenging in my practice, I can always just fall back. I can always just lay down on the dirt. I can always just lay in the ground and let go. Really let go. Like cry, fall into the ground and realize I'm okay. I can be in that, right? And then come back up to sitting or standing or going into life. And one of the things that's so special about that is that then we don't deify somebody, right? Like I'm not asking you to deify me, to make me into some deity that needs to be, right? And that happens in our practice with teachers, right? And I think that was something that's very special about Shogun Trungpa and how he taught these teachings, is that this is how they were taught. Like is that it's a it's the indestructible path. It's a practice that is discovered naturally if you just sit and go in and work with the environment as it is. And the final thing I think that's really special about nowadays is that it also shows us that we're a part of the environment, and that everything we do with the environment matters, right? Like we really start to care about what we eat, how we throw things away, how that, right? Because when you're connecting to the earth all the time, like you're you just start to become more aware, right? Of like I'm in this spot, this place,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Like you said, feeling connected to it and not feeling as though we're separate. And I feel like that is one of the, and certainly in the West, because a lot of Western philosophy is based around the separate self, isn't it? So the path to,
mm-hmm,
salvation is to have the biggest, most inflated, most grand sense of self. And it very much
mm-hmm,
is these kind of win lose metrics, player versus player. And
mm-hmm,
people are fine with, for me to get ahead, that means I've got to step over you. And it's so
mm-hmm,
prominent. And I don't think people realize that, when we go to Eastern philosophy, they say, no, you aren't a separate self. That's just like a part of the story. Actually, you're part of the whole. And,
mm-hmm,
for me, both are true. Like we are a unique self. So each one of us, we are wonderfully unique with our own expression, our own soul, our own flavor that is indistinguishable from anybody else, which is absolutely incredible and it should be celebrated. But also, we're connected to absolutely everyone and everything. We are
mm-hmm.
connected to the earth. We are like I am connected to you. I am a part of the whole. I
Mm-hmm.
came from source. And I
Yeah.
think to me, it feels as though that's meant to be part of the maturation process. I'm convinced that this kind of journey of snake to the crane, kind of meant to start on, belly on the ground, only seeing things from our own perspective. But we're meant to make that journey where we get to a higher place where we can see, like, oh, I see the bigger picture now. I'm not
mm-hmm.
just a separate me where the things that I do only affect me. And if you think about it, as a baby, we call for the things that we need, we cry for the things that we need. And then as we get to a toddler, we kind of cry for the things that we want and we confuse needs and wants. And we kind of confuse, like before, if I cried, I got everything I wanted, but it's because you only
Mm-hmm.
wanted the things that you needed.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as we kind of get a little bit older, we start to realize, oh, okay, share, okay,
Yeah.
okay, I'll do it with my daughter now. She's 6,
Uh-huh.
and with food, you'll see sometimes she's like, well, I'll give you one, but I'm not sure about the rest of them. And I'm like, well, is that sharing? And she's like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay, have as many
Yeah,
as you want.
yeah.
And but I feel like in the West specifically, we get to a point where we go, okay, yeah, so my immediate family, I can kind of see why I should do things with them. But even then, some people don't want to. They're still kind of thinking more about them. And it seems like Western kind of culture just really is rooted in this separate self more than
Yeah.
others. Because so my mum is English. I'm born and raised here. My dad was from Tunisia, which is North Africa. And even just seeing my family over there and the culture there, how they are with family and with community, it's so different to how it is over
Hmm.
here. So different.
Yeah.
That sense of it's like say over here. I mean, I do it all the time. I've got neighbours where there's a neighbour on this side of me, which is the house kind of across the road, and I say hi
Hmm.
and we wave. I've lived next to him for nearly 5 years. Don't know his name.
Mm.
I don't know his name.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just
Yeah.
think we're just so separated. And I feel like that separation, to me, it feels as though it comes from existing in the mind, thinking we are our minds. I am my mind rather than.
We made mindfulness into mindfulness, but it wasn't mindfulness. We didn't have a word for the soma, which is the energy body, or the in the somatic body. When we translated these texts to our culture, to a Western culture, we didn't yet make the connection of the nervous system. And so we translated this with our brain focus on mindfulness. And a lot of our practices around mindfulness and meditation are around trying to feel good, right? And to feel better or to be more productive. And that's not the point of a somatic practice. Somatic practice is to be with the experience of what is happening on and in the body. And if when that happens, we realize that there are things happening on and in the body that are disturbing or that we have a hard time being with, right? And then in that practice, it's deeply rooted in and that you can trust the body, you can be in your body. But think of how many people actually are afraid to be in their bodies, right? The experience of their life has told them it's not safe to be in your body. You can't go in there. And so we try so hard to go top down, right? And that image behind you on the wall of the I'm going to say a mountain and like the sun on top of it, right? In in a somatic practice, I think this is a really great example of this. Um, there's this, there's all of these references to being the mountain, right? And how the mountain is deeply rooted and it's unmovable, it is unshakable. And I didn't know the word unshakable was used. When I named the Unshakable Man, it just came to me through practicing. At first we were going to be the authentic man, and then I was like, no, it's so about how I've shaken in my life, right? Like I've been so deeply shaken and it's helped me to open. And then after reading Shogun Trungpa, I find out he actually calls this practice becoming unshakable. Like
Wow.
6 years after naming the Unshakable Man, right? And one of the things that we'll often use as a tool in our retreats is that a picture of the mountain. And what we have done with the hero's journey is we'll put a man on the mountain, and that man will conquer the mountain. He'll climb up the side of the mountain. And we see so many images of this in Western culture, right? Like we go to Everest to climb and to get to the top of the mountain, and we leave all our trash behind along the way, right? We have this vision, or like we this thing of this external purpose that we're going to go get, as if we're a hero, we're heroic, we're tough, we're brave, we're closing ourselves off, we're hardening, we're like physically hardening our bodies in order to push through the experience of our life. And that's not what the mountain represented. The mountain At first, the mountains are mountains and the trees are trees, and then the mountains are no longer mountains and the trees are no longer trees. But in the end, the mountains are mountains and the trees are trees, and all is one. Like from a Zen perspective, the mountain represented be you were as you build your posture and you breathe down into the earth and you breathe up from the earth into the body and you open and you become dignified and soft and sensitive and tender and fierce, you are a mountain.
Mm.
You are a mountain,
You are the mountain.
right?
Yeah.
And then the energy comes out the top of your head and you create the sun,
Yeah.
right? You're not running up the mountain. You're not Sisyphus. But look at how our culture, from our Western culture, we look at it as, oh, that's a mountain. I need to go climb it and conquer it. And like these
Mhm.
guys were like, no, 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 no. The mountain's inside of you,
You are the
right?
mountain.
You just got to get your energy and awareness out of your head and down into the belly, right? And then you start to identify with the belly, not with all this stuff out here, or at least you let go of it a little more easily, right? You become a little more understanding of your neighbor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most people might not realize or have reference for when you go, when you embark on this inner journey, it really
Yeah.
can be like climbing a mountain. It can be something. People talk about conquering the mountain by going out and climbing it, but flip it inwards
Mm-hmm.
and go in, because the journey that you have to navigate to, like you say, it's not all rainbows and unicorns. It's not all a happy place. Sometimes you kind of got to go into the
Mm-hmm.
dark, and it can be like climbing that mountain. But
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting, like as above, so below. It's like with
Yeah.
conquering that mountain inwardly, you really do then become the mountain. But once you've kind of gone in to
Yeah.
conquer the inner
Yeah.
mountain, right?
Yeah. Yeah. To be with it. Yeah. Yeah. To be with it. I will say, I think that that's one of the reasons for being in a group, right?
Mm,
That, um, I think that there's a lot of images of our own personal practice as if we are expected to sit and to listen to podcasts like this or to read books and then to sit in our cushion alone in our bedroom, and then somehow get up from the cushion and um, collide with the real visceral experience of our life, and that we'll figure it out on our
mm,
own. And I think that in the Unshakable Man, a huge part of the practice is being in a group with a group of 8 other men and meeting for 2 hours a week for 6 months or a year of your life. And when you do that, what you end up happening is that a man in the group is your tormentor, right? Like I can actually help you find places inside that need your energy and attention better than you can on your own. Like people are uniquely qualified to help open you up, right? And open me up. The difference is that my fiance, I don't she is so qualified to trigger places inside me that need my energy and attention. To your daughter example earlier, right? Like you were saying she cries and then you help her, right? Or she cries and she to get what the candy that she wants, or you're teaching her how to share. That whole practice is externalized, right? Like we are learning to um we're just learning through the process of adaptation that, oh, if I cry, daddy will give me something. I'm gonna cry a little bit, right? Or if I hold on to this, right, and then he's gonna help make me feel better. He's gonna help make me feel safe in a healthy, like attachment style, right? But then we get into that middle ground, and what we find is that now I'm looking for my fiance to make me feel good.
mm,
I'm saying, babe, you've surprised me in this journey. You've picked me. I met you, you met me. We were both like, wow, you're awesome. I want to be with you. I'm so ecstatic that a human being, this beautiful girl, has picked me to want to be with her, and I'm picking her. And now when she doesn't make me happy, I'm somehow projecting onto her that you need. I'm so mad. I'm so upset. I'm so enraged because out of all the human beings in the whole wide world, you're the one person that shouldn't be able to make me angry. You should make me happy. But the reverse, learning and becoming more mature and grounded in practice, that I learned in group with other men, is that no, 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 no. She didn't make me angry. She did something and I felt anger.
Mm-hmm.
This is my job. It's my job to be like, wait, what am I feeling? Where do I feel in my body? Oh, wow, I am feeling angry. And then to be able to go to the car, sit alone, and to feel it, and to be like, wow, I'm so angry. What does it need? It needs to speak. It needs to yell. It needs to, and to give it that. And then to become the primary caretaker for my parts, to be like soothe myself and be tender with myself like no one has ever done for me. And then to come back to the relationship and say, hey, babe, earlier when something happened, this is what I was feeling. This is what I need. And you're now not speaking from that part, you're speaking for it. Right. And then she starts to trust, right? And you learn these skills together to be able to hold space for each other's rage or anger, right? And the whole, at least in my relationship and many of the men that I work with, it's like our whole relationship shifts. And I discover that like this must be what older people meant when they said falling in love over and over again. Like I was in love with a way she was in the beginning, but now because there's some space in our relationship, I'm actually learning to create more space and to let her grow.
Mm.
Like she's actually changing into a different woman in front of my eyes. And that's scary and erotic, like sexy, right?
Yeah.
Like cool, right? And I just, I see that in totally transposed, but in how you have a daughter, right? And Anna was a daughter, right? And her dad treated her a certain way. And
Mm.
I get to learn about that. I get to learn about what if she wants to open for me and to tell me how it was to be a kid and to do
Mm.
her work, right? And
Something that
yeah.
came up then as you were sharing that, and I think it is interesting, especially when people are trying to be more conscious. I think there's an interesting dynamic that can unfold where we go from we can feel like a victim at times if our partner does something and we think they did it to us. And like you say, we kind of think that
Mm-hmm.
it was their responsibility to make me happy. And then I think we can get awareness of that and go, no, hang on a minute, my state, my responsibility. And what is interesting
Yep.
is I think sometimes we can kind of go to the other end of the spectrum as well, where we actually say entirely, my state, my responsibility. They can do no wrong. If ever I get triggered by anything they do, it's because I allowed it. And actually,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you have to go, hang on a minute. Am I
Uh-huh.
now accepting behavior where I'm that actually is a healthy point where we see each other, we know each other's needs, and
Mm-hmm.
we're gentle around those things. And then if one partner isn't doing those things, or I think sometimes it can be easy to slip the other way. And I know I've done that where I think if I am literally like, if I'm feeling any negative emotion, it's because I've not been the king of my state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
interesting then because
Yeah.
then it gets a bit more nuanced, doesn't it? Where we have to start to look and go, oh, well, I've gone to the other end now where actually
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's a couple of things that my partner did there that it's questionable.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, man. Spoken like a man who's actually practicing. Spoken like a man who is actually colliding with the reality of the experience of his life, right? Like that to me, I got a shiver down my ears and my right side of my body, like yeah, right? Because it's what I'm seeing in your depiction there is that um, for many men, that being angry or having needs, way of relating has been to deny my needs, right?
Mm,
To actually say, I don't have needs. I'm here to take care of you,
yeah.
right? And as we become more sensitive, right, there is there is this quality of our practice which can almost become like stoic. And this is one of the reasons why I think stoicism and stoic philosophy versus practice are two totally different things, right? Like we, especially with king, warrior, magician, lover, we have these archetypes, and then men, especially early in their practice, will adopt, like, okay, this is how I'm supposed to look. Like I look this way. I look like I've got it all together. But the reality is it's spiritual materialism, right? Like you're emotionally and spiritually bypassing your inner experience, and you're pretending that you don't actually have any of those needs or something. And I think when you're actually in your body, you can actually feel it. And that's why it's hard, right? You can actually feel that, wow, okay. So in my arc there, right? I just want to speak for myself, right? To use myself as an example. Early in our relationship, we've been together for 6 years. I would, when I started to learn that, okay, I am, when things are happening in a relationship, if I'm getting angry or frustrated or mad, I'm actually, it's not about Anna, it's about me, it's about my practice. How do I take care of those places inside? She's helping me do this. There was like a refractory period, right? There's like a 2 hour period, or like going to the car to be alone, and then realizing, oh, I can actually learn to soften and to cry or to yell or to do something for myself. And it always felt very weird. It
Mm,
felt like, this is weird, right? I'm never going to tell anyone about this. Like what am I doing? And but then I would feel better, right? And then I could come back, and then it turned into, wait, you're better? How are you okay? I'm not okay, right? Like now I was okay. I wasn't so needy, like needing to talk about
mm,
it or talk things through. I could just come back and be like, hey, I hear you, I see you. Now I can speak four parts. I can actually be more. Then I had to learn to be fierce. And I would say I'm still learning to be fierce, right? Because as that happens, now I realize all of these different ways that I like didn't want to disturb her, right? Like sexually, like expressing what my needs were or not expressing what they were and trying to get them in a sideways weird way, right? Or or with food, especially because my partner is a gold star vegetarian and I wasn't, right? So like I would just eat vegetarian all the time around her, right? And but I dude, like I wasn't vegetarian for a long time, right? So that's right. And they seem, I like how we're both laughing about it, and it's cool to laugh about, but it's what you're saying, man. Like it's not, it's 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 dynamic, right? It's soft, it's sensitive, and that's the creativity, I think. That's why I want to be here with you, right? To talk about this in this way, because we need guys talking about this, right? Like how interconnected and effervescent our practice can be as men, right?
yeah.
As guys who look masculine, right?
Mm,
Like are showing up, embodying what others would project onto us as being, oh, he's manly. It's like, well, yeah, but I am tender. I am soft, right? And powerful, right?
I think it's fantastic for men to hear, but I also think it's really good for women to hear as well, because I think sometimes
Yeah.
they can be surprised by these things. Like something that I've said before, which I think maybe sometimes women might not quite understand, because we see it in popular culture in films, or where it's like it's almost like a joke where after a marriage in a certain amount of time, the women complain about like the men wanting to have sex, and it's like, oh, birthdays
Mm.
and Christmas, and it's made
Hmm.
light of. But And I think sometimes women, and I'll speak for me personally. I'm not going to speak for all men. I'll speak for myself.
Yeah.
Um, I think a lot of women can think that men just want sex because it's a physical thing. But for me, it is how I feel the most connected to my
Mm.
partner. And, in that kind of deep, loving relationship, it almost feels like a spiritual connection. And it's so much more than this physical act of like,
Mhm.
oh, he's just horny. Not at all. Like, this is how I like feel that
Mhm.
like such a deep, loving union with the person that I'm with.
It's beautiful.
And I think sometimes that can that can get missed. I know for me, certainly, if I've been in relationships where the intimacy started to reduce a little bit, I would feel a little less connected. And I think sometimes
Mhm.
I then go into my head and think, well, hey, should I be okay with that? Should I let that go? Is it important to me? And again, I'd
Mm.
bounce between these two sides of, am I being reasonable? Am I being unreasonable? Is this a healthy attachment to to sex? Is it an
Mhm.
unhealthy attachment? And I'm kind of working my way through, and then I kind of arrive at the point where I realize, no, this is like such a beautiful thing that I only want to experience with this one person, where I feel such a deep, loving connection that almost seems like it goes past the physical.
Mhm.
And I want to kind of, and I cherish that and honor that, and I want to cherish and honor the person I'm with that. And I think sometimes,
Yeah.
and again, I don't know if I'm speaking, I can't speak for all men here, but I do think there's a lot of women.
When you
that-
speak for yourself, man, you're really powerful. You're going to connect with someone.
yeah, right. And I think some women might be surprised by that.
Um, I think, yeah. I mean, people, no matter how you identify, whether you want to be the feminine or the masculine in polarity in your relationship, whether you're in, uh, no matter if you're in a same partner relationship or you're in a relationship with a man or a woman, I think the thing that is beautiful for me in connecting on this with you is that this what you and I are getting into right now to me is one of the key subjects that I think we get into in a group, right?
Mm,
What you literally just did, where you shared, okay, this is what sex is to me. This is what connection is to me. This is what's going on in my relationship right now. Am I okay with that?
mm,
Am I okay with that? What does this say about my belief system? What does this mean? What does this tell me sex has been for me? Am I okay with that? Do I want it to go deeper? Right. And we're all, we're all silently working on that in our own world, like
mm,
as human beings. Right. And to be able to share that into a group and then to have a man in the group say, hey, when you said that, I felt open. I felt excited.
mm,
Right. I felt turned on in my own way. Like, I'm really interested in what you're bringing into this space, man. Would you want to talk about this outside of the group? Right. And then that man is like, hey, have you ever thought about, you know, cleaning your bedroom and having and making your space into your space to connect? And then instead of having penetrative sex, you just simply are with each other and you turn on some music and you gaze into each other's eyes for 10 minutes, right? And just play with it, right? And then come back to the group and share, what was that experience like, right? And that is a very real example from like this week for me in a group with a group of guys, where a guy comes in and shares where he's at, and he sounded just very similar to the way you're showing up, right? And I agree that one of I'll share this, like, we just did a 25-person retreat in San Francisco and Boonville this past weekend, and um, my fiance Anna and the fiance of one of our facilitators, Scotty King, that his fiance, both they did they were part of the team, and they did a lot, all of the cooking. They really, Anna has never been to a men's retreat, and this is a huge part of our life, of my gift to the world, and the vision that I have for our family of wanting to. I grew up in a bed and breakfast, and I
Nice.
watched my dad make breakfast every morning for everybody, and he still does it right now. He's
That's
never
cool.
taken a day off from that. It's incredible. And I've always had this image of like the family farm, of being able to do this service, to be able to create this space for men to connect deeply with themselves. And but early in our relationship, like, it was hard for me because it felt like I would go away to do a men's retreat, and Anna would stay out of it, right? Like, because it's a men's retreat. Anna wasn't coming to the men's retreat. And this was our first time getting able to do this together. And she really took it on. She took on the whole thing. And it was this amazing thing of, as a couple, of getting to work together, but alone. Like, we're not working with each other, but we're around each other. And when we were at the retreat, a few different men told me, or told her, that their partners were um, upset or didn't unhappy about hearing that a woman was cooking for the men.
Hmm.
And Anna told me about it when we were walking down the street in the sun, and I felt so happy. It made me so happy, like, because she feels so grounded in herself. She's so incredibly grounded in herself that that doesn't come up for her. You know, like, my fiance, my partner, wanted to just come make food for us, you know, and it's so beautiful because she wouldn't have had that before. Like, when we first met, like, she's this firecracker, right? I I really feel like when we first met, she would have been like, no, we need to be equal, or like, or somehow there's like this corrosive um masculine thing of like somehow being that way. But through our union, through our relationship together, she has really healed parts of her feminine goddess, like the way she shows up in the world, so much so that she's not threatened by me. you know that like, I feel comfortable not just to invite her, but like, I want to do this with her. And so
Yeah,
much so that I didn't even see it coming. Right right And other guys
that's beautiful,
told
though.
her. Yeah. And it's weird, right? Because in my head, there is still this cultural thing of egalitarianism, right? Of like the patriarchy and men. Like, we do hold this position in our culture, and we have, and the culture of manhood has been corrosive for so many men and so many women, right? And that exists, right? Like, that has existed, but it almost stands in the way of being like, of doing our own healing, right? Like having a space for men to connect and to heal, right? Like, it's almost as if there's like this shadow aspect to that that says, well, because so many men have hurt people, men shouldn't be allowed to be in a men's group, right? Like, and the first time I went to go on a men's retreat, Anna was like, why can't I go? I don't want you to go on a retreat. Like, we have so many few weekends alone together, and you're going to go on a men's retreat. And she still, after that thing, is like, it wasn't that I didn't want you to go on a men's retreat. It's that I wanted to go with you. I wanted to go do something with you. And I didn't understand that men needed a space to be alone. Right. but that was hard for me because my protective parts were like, anything that disturbs my partner at that stage of our relationship was bad. And it was a
Mm,
really big deal for me to go on my own, right? To
yeah,
let her be upset with me,
yeah,
right? And go away for the weekend and spend $1,500 on me, right? Like, and I say the amount of money because it's real.
yeah, yeah. And that is the thing, if we, and this is what I was kind of alluding to before about sometimes we can be at one end of the spectrum and then we find ourselves at the other. So, for example, sometimes we can, we don't want to be selfish and only think about our own needs. So then we kind of surrender all of our own needs and we'll just think about our partner, like, oh, okay, well, I don't want to make them upset because if I'm doing that, I'm being selfish. I'm only thinking about me. So, okay, I'll drop the thing that would actually serve me really well so I can show up as a better version of a man for you. And then we maybe
Mm-hmm.
surrender those things. And it can be like a real like tornado of, trying to
Yeah.
find this balance. Because again, I can say that, firsthand that I have done that. I've been at a point in my life where I thought it was honorable to suffer, to almost sacrifice myself. I thought there was some honor in that, to put myself as the
Mm-hmm.
Messiah on the cross, and I will suffer the pain in the
Mm-hmm.
name of, you know, my partner. I will sacrifice my wants and needs, and I'll put myself through this to try and make this work.
Mm-hmm.
I've done that because I thought it was honorable in some way. I actually thought that made me more of a man because I wasn't one to
Yeah.
just bounce and actually put with some things that maybe, and not that it was intentional, and it was definitely, it's wounded patterns for both people that are always going on. I can
Yeah.
really recognize that, but sometimes you have to go, okay, this really isn't that me not willing to do this or sacrificing that. That's not a selfish thing. It's just knowing that what value do I put on myself in filling my own cup, not at the detriment of my partner's cup being filled,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
knowing that if my cup is full, I can then give from my overflow.
Yeah. It's yeah, man. And this I call it a scary carnival ride. That can only be felt. You can't think it through because the head aligns to the state of the body, right? The story in our head follows the state of our body. And if I drop into if I try, I create this like tension. The very, very real practice of discernment that you just shared is I think the one of the core reasons for always like returning into the body, right? Like because when I come into the lower belly, as my practice matures, that unconditioned space is a space that I can start to identify with. I can start to get a sense of what it feels like to be grounded, right? To be okay. And when you're depicting this like you had your hands up like side by side and it's like, oh, like am I gonna just put up with this or am I not gonna put up with this, or when do I speak up, or am I gonna not just put up with it but am I gonna take this on as like a like an identification of being strong, like I can take a lot of suffering, right? And I think the only way we feel through that is by having a practice to drop in and to be like, okay, like, so this is, this is what it feels like to be here. And then you can see through the confusion as best you can, right? And make a decision. And I really firmly, I know this is a belief, but from coming back and forth, that that's what we're all trying to do. We're all like upgrading our intuition over time, as long as some of us are practicing more than others in terms of actually being in our bodies, right? and that's why we repeat these patterns, right? Like we might break up with somebody, but then we just end up in the same loop.
I think men specifically, can be very reluctant to talk about feelings because feeling in and of itself is the feminine of, the feminine
Mm-hmm.
and masculine. And I think sometimes we think that to be men, we have to abandon the feminine aspects within us, one of which is to feel. And I think that's when people talk about toxic masculinity, I'm not sure that there is any such thing as toxic masculinity. I think it's unbalanced masculinity, where it's the balance of the feminine,
Yeah.
not the feminine outside of ourselves as a counterpart, but the feminine within us. I believe that is what prevents toxicity of anything. I think if anything, if if the heart only expands and doesn't contract, well, we've got a problem. And if the lungs only, if you only inhale and you don't exhale, we've got a problem. And there are all these kind of just laws within the universe. And I think if we're,
Mm-hmm.
as men, only leading into masculinity and we're not balancing inwardly with the feminine, it's going to create a toxic version of that. And I think some people think it's
Yeah.
masculinity that's toxic. It's not. It's just
Yeah.
all of
I
all of anything of one thing without the
yeah.
other thing to bring balance can become problematic.
Yeah. I prefer to use the word corrosive. Like there are corrosive forms of masculinity, or shapes of corrosive manhood, that are shame based. Or have you ever talked much about the man box?
No.
No, no. So the man box is a beautiful frame to look at from the relationship, the culture of manhood. But basically, there's the that in the culture of manhood, which is not masculinity or femininity, it's a culture of manhood, which tells people who want to identify as male or to be a part of that culture, that they have to be a certain way. And that culture of manhood is hegemonic. And what hegemonic manhood is it's the dominant culture of manhood in a given society, right? So you have a culture of manhood in your neighborhood in England. I have a culture of manhood in my neighborhood in San Francisco. And we have a culture of manhood globally because of the internet and TikTok and Disney and all of these images of that our culture are putting out into the world, saying this is, if you want to be this, this is what this image is indirectly or directly saying a man is, right?
Mm.
And so we get these messages, and to be in the box. And so you and I could do an exercise right now. We could just list off what are the identifiers of being a man. I'll list off 5: strong, stoic, or if you want to go back and forth, like I'll do strong, you do one.
Successful,
Athletic,
decisive,
sex seeking.
sex attaining,
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Safety, protectors, protectors,
unwavering,
and wavering. Um, I'll do one more, and I'll give you to do one more. Uh, don't cry. So we have a bunch of these identifiers, right? And those are
alpha.
okay. Alpha, perfect. That actually is a good one for where we're going. So we have these like identifiers, right? And I want to have full permission right now that just because we name these doesn't mean that I agree with them.
Yeah,
Okay, and I'm not placing that on you either.
yeah.
Okay, but because we were able to make this up, there's this there's this culture that exists that we're carrying around in our shadow all the time. And if you step out of that box, I'm not going to make you do it now from surprising you, but certain things are said to us when we step out of the box. Certain things happen to us if I'm not an alpha, or if I don't protect, or if I cry, or if I dance, right? Or if I'm flexible. And what that, all of those things that happen are controlled by one emotion, and that is shame. Shame is the primary emotion that keeps men in the box. And shame is adaptive. It's not bad, but it is in our culture manufactured over and over and over again. In the early time, when we were in small groups, shame was very constructive because it helped us stay in a group, in a small group. If I took food from you and it hurt the group and I felt shame about that, it was actually constructive. It helped us survive. It helped me not steal from you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But now shame is turned inward, right? And if I cry or if I'm flexible, you're not shaming me. I'm shaming myself over and over and over again, right? And so what happens with in a men's group is that we are all coming together and we're dropping out of this mask, and we're realizing that we are able to open the box. We are able to expand the box to include so much more, right? And that's the integration, right? I'm integrating my feminine, I'm integrating my ability to sense and to feel. And the primary thing from a somatic perspective that the man box does to men in our culture is it disconnects us from our bodies. It tells us that if we feel our bodies, we are somehow not a man. And this can come directly from pushing through and surviving, right? And think about that. To pick up your daughter and to feel her, to feel your nervous system and to open it and to just be like, I'm going to help you feel safe. Not daddy's afraid. Dad is grounded, right? So many men have been taught that the only way to be safe is to harden
Mm-hmm.
more, right? And so we disconnect from our bodies. So a big part of that integration of the masculine and the feminine is creating a structure which is masculine. In the practice, the the form is masculine and everything is feminine. Is we come into the group and we join a men's group like the Unshakable Man, and we go through a journey where we actually open up what this box is, and we get to learn how different men have had different relationships with the box, and then we recreate the box after that journey ends, right? We go back out into our world, into our culture, and we start to realize, wow, this is all these ways that the box has disconnected me from really being an integrated, unshakable man.
I really like that. And, something that came up for me as you were saying that, and, this is kind of, it's interesting. I spent many years doing things to become what society would say is very much the man in the box. Um, and
Yeah.
but the whole time, always kind of feeling that I didn't really feel like that was me, but I felt like I had to kind of, it just felt like that was the thing to do.
That that's literally, that's it, man. That's the thing. That's the right. Like, and then you share it with another guy and you're both like, oh, wow. Right. And then it's expansive.
And here's what's really interesting, though. Sometimes, especially if you then kind of become, um, you know, that whatever that image is, people actually then, I think you almost then feel like you have to keep that image of the person in the box, what that entails and how that is. You actually almost create a rod for your own back where you have to stay there. So I found that when
That
I,
that's corrosive. That's the corrosive. That's the toxic. That's what people say, right? We then reinforce the box to feel safe. And this is what guys do to each other, right? We're like, no, man, like man up, like don't, and it's in two different ways, right? Like on one end, it can be from a loving, caring, compassionate, soft, kind of fun, calling a brother up. But on the other, which is much more prevalent, I'd say, is it's coming from a, hey, don't challenge my box,
mm,
right?
yeah,
Like I'm scared. You're scaring me. I'm going to beat you up if you do this to show you I'm not afraid,
Mhm.
right? To reinforce the box, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's it is interesting because I think also people then can almost expect you to be a certain way by, if you do get there. So for example, um last summer my my girlfriend and I, we went to Tenerife, one of the kind of the Spanish islands, and it was for a friend of mine. It was his 50th birthday. It's quite well known, like personal development speaker, and he has his tribe there. And someone came over to my girlfriend and I, and my girlfriend is traditionally very much the stereotype of beauty. To
Mm-hmm.
take that as you
Okay.
will, you
Yeah.
understand what I mean.
Well said. Yeah. Yeah.
And this person came over to us and said, "Oh, you two look like fish out of water," and almost said it as though like, should we be there because there are these people that are kind of spiritual, but her and I were probably two of the most spiritual people there, and it's just
Yeah. So
really
they're judging you.
they were completely
They're,
judging us for thinking that we don't look like we should be at an event with spiritual
yeah.
people.
Look at me, man. I walk around. Everyone thinks I'm a bro, right? Like yet the heart, the depth of that heart and that connection is just so right. And that I feel connected to you in this.
Yeah,
Yeah. Keep going. I'm interested.
yeah. It's
Sorry for cutting you off.
I just think it's interesting that sometimes, you know, because of how we look, and maybe even more so how we look together, just people would have these assumptions of who we were and what we were about. And there's a show, I think you might have it in the US, Love Island. Do you have like it's a reality TV show? We've got it over here in the UK, and
Yeah. 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 I
we'd have
think I've heard of Love Island.
we'd have
Yeah.
someone come up to us like, "Oh, you two look like you should be on Love Island," and I've never watched the show, but I understand the concept of it, and it's not that I take offense to it. Like I get it, I get what they're saying, but sometimes then people
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
expect us to be a certain way, and it's just interesting because then sometimes to actually
Mm-hmm.
break out of that mold that you may have created for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
like it's actually you create a harder shell to break through to go, no, let me show you who I really am.
Yeah. And you soften though in that process and you become much more capable of noticing that these people are seeing a part of me. They're seeing maybe my managerial protective part or this that has formed, but that's not all of me, right? And the more that you deepen in your practice, the less reactive maybe you are to that, right? And the more you allow that stuff to kind of open you, right, to help you find that broken heart that allows you to connect with the world. Or before you go through that, you harden more, right, and you become more, you almost hold on to it, like you said, like you have like a rod. And there's a good example you're reminding me of like there's this a gentleman that is in our groups who's very tall, very good looking. He like traditionally good looking, and he's in a group, and then there's another man who's much smaller, Hispanic man, and um, one of the men identifies as straight, one identifies as gay, and they when one of the men shares in the group, the other man gets scared and gets angry and feels threatened and then says, hey, you, the way you look, you remind me of the men that have hurt me, right? And then one of the most beautiful things about that kind of experience is that in the structure of that group, the tall good looking man who seems to be this image, we realize that this man is so sad because that happens to him a lot, right? And I think I connect with that, right? Like I think you might really be able to intuitively understand what it feels like right? To be that Love Island image. And then people are seeing that. They're not seeing you're being judged all these times, right? And for that man, that happened. But then for the other man, he realizes in that experience that, wow, I can sit through this reaction and then end up realizing I have been projecting this onto this man and I actually feel bad about that. So now there's a man that is big who hurt me, who actually beat me up in the past, that represents this image and threatened my safety. And I can actually see through that and realize that this man isn't that, doesn't represent that man. And that experience happens all the way to the point where these two men end up driving together in a car to go to a men's retreat for 4 hours in the same car, right? And that experience happens, right? And then that shift doesn't just affect them, it affects 100 people, right? Because you start to realize that this thing, right, this external mask, I don't have to hold on to it so hard, right? And I actually really fully know, this isn't a belief, I know that when you drop out of that and then come back in, you only start to be able to share it more creatively, right? Like you become the Love Island magician, right? Like you become this guy that can kind of be soft and goofy but bold, right? Like you can it, right? But if your experience hasn't been like that, if you don't have these heart opening experiences that are shaped with a scaffolding with people in our life like you and me, um, then it can go in a totally different direction. It can go into protective. It can go into we wall ourselves off. We become lone wolves, right? We hold even harder onto our shell, and then we see news articles. We see things that project more of that, right? More of that philosophy, and I just share both because I share both as like a depiction of like we really it really does go the other way, right? Like to appreciate like how special it is to have men or experiences in our life like you and I are having, right? Where we're taking time on a Sunday out of our life to talk about these things, that guys engage, people engage with this. And for me it's this sense of awe, like appreciation and fear, right? Like that, like you really can, there are really people out there who aren't accessing this, right? They don't have these relationships. And so what we're asking of these people is to believe us, right? And that's challenging. You can't really believe your way here. You have to actually directly experience connection, right? You actually have to have moments in your life where somebody really truly sees you, right? And some of us have just not had that, right? Like it's violent.
And this is the thing that honestly I believe, and this is largely my message, that that is your path to joy when you do show up in your fullest. Now it's the thing that I love the most is when I'm speaking to someone at the gym and I'm showing up with an open heart, with softness and tenderness as I'm speaking to them. I'm really taking them in. And what's amazing is when I see them drop into a state that matches mine. That's the gift. That's the magic.
Yeah. Yeah, that is what, yeah, man, that's the co-regulation, right? Like that's you coming into your body, dropping out of your head and just being with this human being. You're not trying, you're allowing. And then sub they see that from they feel it, right? And if they don't feel it, you're so rooted, right? You're so down in that lower chakra that you're not making their karmic explosions worse, right? You're like doing this with them, right? Which is to me the integrated masculine in perfect example, right? Like you're like the sailboat on the feminine ocean, right? You're hopefully not sinking, right? And you're charting a course, right? And you're taking people on board with you, and you're sailing, you're surfing, right? Which is very, very different than like, rah, I'm gonna I'm gonna like force this or like tell someone they're wrong, right?
Yeah,
It's very beautiful.
absolutely.
Thanks for having me on, man. This has
Ah,
been really awesome.
yeah, brother, thank you so much. I'll wrap up. For anyone that would like to find you, Chris, how can they go about doing that?
Unshakableman.com. That's the best place. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. It's beautiful conversation, and more message and gift to everyone. I really I really did feel multiple times here that like when you take time, two men, two human beings here having this conversation, that it really does help more than just the people that are listening, right? It helps the people they interact with.
Yeah, man. Brother, thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that conversation. And if you haven't already, please like the video. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do that. Now, if you want to get in contact with Chris, his website is going to be in the show notes or description below. And also, if you want to contact with me, my details are going to be below as well. Last thing, we have the Conscious Community, the free Facebook group. If you want to come and join that and start to build a tribe of people that have these types of conversations, like-minded people, then it would be my honor to have you there and join me. It's completely free. So that link will be below if you'd like to do that as well. All right. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.